Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Rod Fleming here today, as usual, like every day. And today we're going to discuss unconscious bias, but it's not what you think. But before we do that, please remember to subscribe, hit the bell button, go to one of the funding sites, which I will give the URL for us, and just send a little something, price of a pint. Like I say, there are over 300 videos on this channel now, and this is information you won't get anywhere else. So, please, price of a pint, that's all I ask. Buy me a coffee. Anyway, unconscious bias. And you have heard of this in terms of unconscious bias against, for example, black people and pale people and punks. You'll have heard of that, right? Actually, unconscious bias has been around a lot longer than that. That's just become fashionable recently. And the one form of unconscious bias, which is in many ways the most prevalent, and they don't want you to talk about, they don't want you to even hear about it, is this one. It's unconscious bias against white boys, particularly working class white boys, right? Ordinary, lower middle class white boys. They're the most significant victims of unconscious bias present in society today. Why has this happened? The reason is twofold. Firstly, since roughly 1960, the balance in teaching has completely inverted, so that now academia and teaching, really right from primary, elementary, primary schools, right through to grad school, is now dominated by women, and most of them are feminists, and most of them hate masculinity. A lot of them are lesbians, and teachers in particular, they hate the fact that one of the characteristics of boys is that they tend to be a bit rowdy. That's just something that boys are. And it takes a firm hand to keep them under control. Now, I remember what I was like when I was at school, and yeah, there were some women teachers that we gave absolute peddlers to. They got absolute, oh dearie, dearie, dearie. They really did get a lot of stash from the boys. But there was nothing they could do, because they simply didn't have authority. They were women, but they weren't our mothers, so that was it. Fair game. There were some whom we lived in holy terror of. Make no mistake, some of them who, I tell you, if they walked into the room now, I'd shit myself. Sorry, I didn't actually say that, you two. You know what I do. But there was, I have to admit, there was a significant number who really had no clue whatsoever as to how to deal with boys. And the reason was most of them weren't married, they didn't have kids of their own, they couldn't do it. They had never learned how to actually look after boys in a kind of sympathetic way. And of course now we have a situation where people will join the teaching profession. They haven't had kids, for school to college to university, and then they came back to teach in the schools, and that was basically it. They haven't a clue. They have not one Scooby about what the world is about what life is like. And so they've got all these boys behaving like boys, and that has to be stopped. We have had stories of boys being jacked up with Thorazine and stuff like that, just to keep them calm. I mean, what is this? These boys are behaving normally, totally normally. I just will put nail my colours to the mast here. I think co-education is an absolute disaster. It should never have happened, and we should ban it immediately. Boys need to be educated separately from girls. Simple. And what they need in charge of them is all men. Right? Because men know how to look after boys. We know how to deal with them. We know when they're just being a little bit wild. And it's like, Smith, take 200 lines. That sort of thing. It's just, and Smith goes, oh, okay, sir. Or we can be the dead shot, deadly dick with a piece of chalk, which of course you're not allowed to do anymore. And I remember when I was at school, they had these blackboard, and they are called blackboards. When I went to school, they were black. They weren't green. They had these blackboard cleaners, right, which are about 6 inches long and an inch and a half square, and it was kind of like felt matted and a wooden handle, and they would just they were absolute dead crack shots, and they'd get you right here. Oh Christ, why hit me? What was that? Fleming, stop talking. You see, women can't do that. They just can't do it. The trouble is, so what they do is that at the slightest sign of boys being normal masculine boys, they scream, "Oh, toxic masculinity, we can't have that in the classroom!" And then they start punishing them. And the way they punish them is they mark them down. They force them to be absent from class. They give them detentions. They give them everything they can possibly do. They give them no attention. They don't attend to them. They attend to the girls, they don't attend to the boys. This is what's happening in schools today now. This is what's happening. And it's bias. Some of these teachers actually think that I'm just ordinary teachers, I don't have bias. Of course they do. It's just unconscious. So unconscious bias is a real thing. But I don't really think it's an issue, certainly not in Britain, for people of non-white backgrounds. I really don't. Britain didn't have any black people till 1950. Well, a couple of hundred maybe. There is no tradition, It's not like the United States or Australia, where there is a long tradition and there are issues, that have big, deep roots, and they're serious issues, and they shouldn't be belittled, but they don't exist in Britain because we didn't have any. Our immigrants were Italian or Irish or French. There are loads of French immigrants after the Catholics threw out the Huguenots. We probably didn't know who they were, didn't you? But anyway, what we've got instead is unconscious bias against whites, particularly white working class boys. Women cannot stand the fact that they love football. And it's not soccer, it's football. For fuck's sake, we invented it. Let us at least name it. For example, the delightful Sally Miller Gerhart, who famously said, and I quote, "The proportion of men must be reduced to approximately 10% of the human race." And they used as breeding slaves, for the women. That's basically nice. She also said, in a less well-known quote, that we had to destroy the kind of male bonding that occurs in team sports. Women are terrified by that. They can't do it. It's something they're incapable of understanding, is that the way that men bond in non-sexual manners. Women bond in non-sexual manners also, but it's not in the same way. A woman might die for her kids, and that's all well and good, but no way would she die for the girl next door. A man might well do that. Faced with a violent situation, he will put his life on the line to protect his teammates. And Miller Gerhart couldn't stand that. It was horrible thought for her. And all of these things, which are a perfectly normal part of masculinity, suddenly become toxic masculinity. You're not allowed to play real rugby anymore. That's the game that we British people play with the oval ball, by the way. You're not allowed to play real rugby. You only have to play touch rugby, which means that when you touch somebody, you have to give up the ball. In real rugby, you tackle them, you knock them down, right? And that's how you get the ball. You take it off them. That's proper rugby. But when I can't have that, oh no, that's way too masculine. Oh no, that just encourages boys to be masculine. I can't have that. And this is what's happening. This is the unconscious bias against boys. And some of the bias is absolutely blatant and in your face. These women hate men. As simple as that. Most feminists really hate men. And again, just a quick point. I'm not talking about the kind of feminism that Mary Wollstonecraft wrote about in the 18th century. You've got all that. You've got all those. Everything she asked for, everything that the suffragettes asked for, you got all that. We're talking about a particularly nasty, vicious political movement, which is actually the successor to communism, right? Which we call feminism. But we know what it actually is. It's just totalitarian collectivism under a different name. And the trouble is, men are naturally individualistic. We're very interesting because we play in teams, we like to be team players, but we're stars in our own right, right? So you get the team, wonderful team, and you get Diego Maradona, a star in his own right. And these don't conflict with each other, whereas they certainly do amongst women, believe me. But women can't stand that, because that's like, oh my God, how can we possibly challenge that? And the thing about women is they must insert themselves at all times. They must insert themselves into male society, and it's particularly true of feminists. So they look at the way that male bonding happens within team groups and in the military and things like that, and they say, how can we actually enter that? How can we infiltrate it? How can we insert ourselves into this male situation? Of course, what happens when any woman appears in a male group is they stop behaving men stop behaving in a masculine manner. They shut it all down. So, and they wait till she's gone, and then they start making the jokes and the innuendos and all the funny stuff, and they start being guys again. They just wait till she's gone. You know, you people are not changing anything. You're not changing men. Men are just doing what they always did. You know, 19th century, the gentleman retired to the smoking room while the women went to the drawing room and played cards, you know, and the men were making, no doubt, highly entertaining comments, cracking jokes, while they scoffed the brandy and cigars. Nothing's changed. You're not going to change anything, ladies. And that's why they really are suppressing and oppressing. The word is oppressing. White working class boys. They hate them, and they know that this is the group that they must destroy. They know they can't challenge the intelligentsia, you know. They've just tried to eradicate them by replacement. That's what feminism does. It replaces men with women. But how do you replace somebody who all he ever wants to do is be a truck driver? So the idea is you oppress his masculinity so that he's ashamed of it. And then he won't be a threat to you anymore. That's what's actually happening. And it's criminal behaviour. It needs to be stopped. That's going to be a real difficult thing to do. The West needs to wake up to the fact that it has got a serious problem. That serious problem, at the moment, is not Islam, right? I mean, it could be in the future. Again, it was for a while, but it's gone back. Or Islamist Islam. There was still a problem with Dawaist Islam, but, you know, the terrorist form is not such a big problem just now, because they know what happens when they start it. Entire nations get erased. It's not the race problem. There is no race problem. That's being manufactured, you know, to cause trouble, because they want trouble. Some people want trouble, mainly white people, by the way. The real problem is feminism. That is the root issue that we have to deal with, we have to address. We need to find an accommodation. Actually, we had an accommodation. So we need to just get back to a situation where there is a genuine equality. And that's been lost. If you look at academia is overwhelmingly, not just female, but feminist. And if you look particularly at the arts and humanities, you dare not be a masculine man. I mean, look at me, I'm a master of fine art. You know, and they won't have me. It's like, no, you're man. And they won't say that, obviously, but it's because I'm too masculine. And they might actually give the guys, the poor boys, and there are still a few boys in art schools who are completely trodden upon by these harpies, some hope for a future life, you know. You know, you can't have that. We've got to eradicate all their hope, you know. We've got to completely destroy all their masculinity. We've got to just crush them under the boot, the iron heel of feminism. It's not even a spike heel, because they don't like looking good. Anyway, that's enough of that. See you later.